What's up, Squadron? Aviation has given me a ton of amazing experiences. And more importantly, it's introduced me to a whole new family of friends. Join us tonight because we're cleared direct for some hangar flying. I'm Bryon Dembroski, and this is SuperAero Live. What's up, Av Geeks? It's Wednesday, which can only mean one thing. It's time for another episode of SuperAero Live. And before we get started with our guest, I just want to wish all of you a happy... I got a notification. Normally what happens on this show is like news happens every Wednesday before the show. We've gone a couple weeks without it, but I just got a notification that North Korea has been launching ballistic missiles today. So that's cool. Don't go check. It's fine. Everything's fine. The news says it's fine. Don't go look at it. Stay here with us. I hope you're all doing well. I'm doing well. I got my Fauci ouchie on Monday. I'm super pumped about that. And maybe some news to share next week about where I'll be in like a month. I'll be a place that's not here in a month. We'll talk about it next week. Anyway, let's stop talking about me. Let's start talking about our guest. Super excited. Carolyn Landron's here. Let's pull her up. There she is. Hey, what's up, Carolyn? How are you?
Good. How are you?
I mean, clearly excited about everything. For those that don't know, you are a returning guest. You were on a kind of a women in aviation panel with us. I think it was just before the holiday season last year, and folks have just been asking. We've had Jen on separately, who was also on with you, the air traffic controller, and folks have been asking for you and her to be on the show a ton because the one downside to that format of like the panel is that we don't get to deep dive with anyone like specifically. So I'm really excited that you're here tonight because we're just going to deep dive into like that airline pilot life if you're into it, or we could talk about whatever you want. I mean, you want to talk about something else, we could do that too, but I'm pumped anyway.
Sounds good.
Do you want to give us It's okay. I made a mistake. I made a joke about the news, and people are talking about the missiles in the chat. It's fine, guys. I'm sure it's fine.
Oh.
Do you want to bring people up to speed, though, for folks maybe who missed that first episode with you last year, just a little bit about who you are? I mean, if they see the title, they know that you are an airline pilot, but maybe just a little bit more about who you are and what you do day to day.
Well, gosh. Let's see. I am an airline pilot right now for Frontier Airlines. I also am on the recruiting and hiring team for Frontier, so I conduct interviews as well and go to recruiting events. I am the president, I was the president, and I'm the founder of the Colorado chapter of Women in Aviation. So before that, there was no representation of women in aviation in Colorado for Women in Aviation International. There was another organization called the 99s, and that was a presence, but none for Women in Aviation International. So I founded that chapter. I was the president for 7 years and created some scholarships and some other stuff. And then I moved to another country and handed off the torch, but I'm still passionate and into it. And now, came back, gosh, there's a lot, but I used to work at Jeppesen and I coded charts for a while. I was a human factors engineer, and I worked on, if people are familiar with Jeppesen charts, the airport moving map application. I was one of 3 who got the own ship, which is the spotter of the aircraft on basically the airport 10-9 chart. We got FAA certification on that. So I've a little bit of a variety of background in aviation.
That's a lot of stuff.
And yeah, and now I still like to volunteer my time when able. I really have a passion for women in aviation, that organization. I try to do whatever I can with that organization as much as possible, but I also try to volunteer whenever I'm able and obviously with the last year with COVID and such, nothing's really been going on with that, but it's called the Mile High Flight Program, and we help inner city school kids get exposed to aviation, the sciences, and it's a really awesome program that some of those kids are the first ones to go to college in their family, and they're just amazing kids. They're sponges, they're highly intelligent, they're eager, and it's such a fulfilling situation. And that's quite a few pilots. Like there's some FedEx pilots, there's some United pilots. I believe I'm the only Frontier pilot, but a couple other gals help out with that too. So I'm passionate about helping others in aviation. I pretty much figured everything out by myself while I was coming up through the ranks. And I had a couple of mentors, but I feel passionately about helping others to figure out their way and offer guidance. If I could save somebody or quite a few somebodies from having to figure all of that out themselves, I'm all in for that. Plus, investing in our youth and the future, that's a pretty big deal to me as well.
What's that song that when you and I were kids, it was like, I believe the children are our future, something like that?
Whitney Houston.
That's right. Yeah, Whitney Houston. So I want to talk about, you hit on a couple of things I want to talk about tonight. I would love to start, we kind of start the show every week with just a little bit of backstory in terms of, I always joke in the emails to people like, I want to hear your origin story. So like, what's the aviation origin story for you? Actually, this is, I think my wife is rarely, she's not an av geek like me, rarely is excited about a guest on this show. She was very excited that you were going to be on tonight, and she sent me some questions for you, and I think one of them was, oh no, she changed them. They're even better. I'll ask these later. Okay, this is really good television. Anyway, talk to me a little bit about... Hang on with me, Carolyn. It's going to be a great night. Talk to me a little bit about... I mean, you just hit on a ton of different like touch points in aviation. The Jeppesen thing, I had no idea about. That's super cool. But talk to me about like, where did how did you get the aviation bug, the flying bug? I mean, because it's not an easy path to get to where you are now. So where did the kernel of that start?
Well, my mom says that the memory that I have, and the one that I'm reminded of by my mom, is she said that we went to visit my grandma in Kansas. And that was back in the days that you get on an airplane and they used to leave the cockpit doors open and you could look up the aisle and see, the lights and the buttons and the pilots and stuff. And I do remember looking up the aisle, and I mean, in my 7-year-old brain, I'm like, wow, they're like God. So I thought that was a pretty big impression for me. And my mom says that I've always said ever since I was little that I was going to be a pilot and a hairdresser, and I did wind up becoming both.
Okay. It's funny. I think people
Random.
That is random. I think people forget. I remember that experience too. Like I think we were flying to San Francisco, and my mom was all stressed out trying to get us in the plane and stuff, and then you like peer up, and just like you're saying, like you see like all the gauges and stuff. It's like, wow, what's happening up there? And that was back when like you could go, I don't know, can you guys even give out the little plastic wings to the kids anymore? Or is that like not, is that a post 9/11
We
victim?
can. No, I think we can. I think it's up to the pilot. Like Frontier didn't typically hand out wings. I had a few for a while that I kept in my bag, but we had like a little card program, and it was like akin to baseball cards, and it had all the different animals from our tails on these cards.
Oh, cool.
So I would mix up and grab a handful of cards, and I would hand those out to kids when they would come on the airplane, and they thought that was cool and stuff. And I still have a handful of them, and if kids do come up, I give them out when they...
Awesome. So then you go, that's like the inciting incident. Like, what was your professional pilot trajectory? Because I mean, obviously it's, as a non-professional pilot, like it's always fascinating to me to hear like kind of like the, someone was on talking like, oh, I used to fly checks back when that was a thing. Like people are talking about all these different, like what was your kind of like, if we had to summarize like the trip up to Frontier, like what would that be?
Well, so I always wanted to be a pilot. I don't know. And then one day I went through this phase, and I still like to do this, where I said, what do you write down your goals of what you do in a year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Well, at the time, I didn't have any kind of foresight to think about 10 years. I mean, geez, I was thinking, what about in 10 months? But I thought I was before college, and I thought, one of my things on my 1 year list was I wanted to get my private pilot's license. And I didn't even know what that meant. I just wanted to do it. I wanted to check it out. So I was working for a temp agency next to Centennial Airport in Denver. And I was driving to this job. And as I was driving down the road, a 172 was on short final for the south runways. And I found myself speeding up to match the speed of this airplane to see how fast it was going. And I went to work that day, and this was back in the day of phone books. And I pulled out the good old fashioned phone book and I looked up flight schools at Centennial Airport. I randomly called one and I said, if I want to do this, how do I do it? And they said, well, we've got intro flights. So I booked an intro flight. You take off with an instructor. I'm sure you know this. And we tootled around. That was before Denver International Airport was a thing. We flew over to that site of the construction, and we flew back. And I was terrified and thrilled, and I signed up that day to get my private pilot's license. And then it just kind of took on a momentum of its own, because what began with this checklist item of an intention for the next year of my life turned into a career and a lifelong path. And I just kind of found myself on this path, which I felt was pretty fortuitous and serendipitous. And so I did that, and then I paused for a while because I didn't know how I was going to pay for the rest of my training. That was when it was like $45 an hour wet for a 172. So I'm dating myself. And so I just didn't know what I was going to do. So then I got a job at Jeppesen, and I worked my way. They were phenomenal. I worked at Jeppesen. I worked another job. I worked two jobs, went to college full time. And they were phenomenal about letting me go to college. And they even helped me pay for college. And that's when I found Women in Aviation, a couple mentors at college who were phenomenal professors. And Women in Aviation came to visit Jeppesen, and I felt this calling. So I approached the president of Women in Aviation, Peggy Chabrian, Dr. Peggy Chabrian, and went down that road. Then graduated from college. I was working on all my flight ratings as I went to college because my degree required those ratings as part of the requirements to graduate from college. So I was working on my AGI, my Advanced Ground Instructor Certificate, which I'm sure you know, but in case someone doesn't, in lieu of the CFI, because I wasn't entirely committed to the CFI route. So I was working on the AGI, which was, like I said, another requirement for my degree. And I was kind of time building off and on. I mean, it was just willy-nilly wherever I could get with somebody. Had a couple people who helped me out with some twins that they had, and twin time and such. And then Mesa Airlines. So back then it was Air Midwest, and they were flying Beech 1900s. They were under the cloud or under the umbrella of Mesa Airlines. So I went to a hiring event at some hotel, and I was a private pilot with like commercial pilot with 280 hours, commercial instrument multi. And I attended this session, and the guy says, okay, there was a handful of us there that was like that. And he said, come back, when you get a little bit more time. He said, but also we're going a hiring session in Phoenix. And oh, by the way, if you take a CRJ familiarization course, I feel like I can present this to the chief pilot a little bit better. So I got with a couple of friends. We said, we're going to go do the CRJ familiarization course, which is CRJ is a Canadair regional jet, for those who may not be familiar with that. So we went down to Phoenix. We took this class, had a great time, learned a lot, went to the hiring event in Phoenix, and the same guy was there. And I think he was a little bit impressed that we'd actually followed his advice and had done that. So he said, I talked to the chief pilot, you're a little bit low time for CRJ, justifiably so. However, he said, we've got slots opening up on the Beech 1900, which I don't know if anyone knows what a Beech 1900 is, but it's a twin turboprop 19C aircraft, no APU, no LAV, no flight attendants, no autopilot. I mean, it's a high performance twin aircraft. And I thought about it for a little bit, and I decided to do it. And that was probably one of the most pivotal and best decisions of my aviation career. I got the best experience ever. I learned a lot, and I met some lifelong friends who I'm still friends with today. So we did that, flew that for about a year. Then Mesa Airlines decided to discontinue the Beech 1900 fleet. So we parked all those aircraft, and then we transitioned over to the CRJ. So then I flew the CRJ there for about 6 years or so, got furloughed, went back to Jefferson, lived somewhere else in Germany, actually. Then I came back, and I got the recall from Mesa, and that's why I came back. So I flew there for another however long, and then I decided that I wanted to be based in Denver, where I live. So SkyWest Airlines had a base in Denver. So although it was a lateral move, there would be a Denver base, which means I didn't have to commute, which we could talk about in another minute if you want. And I could drive to work, and their second year pay was like $1 more an hour than Mesa's like 7-year pay. So I felt like it was a no-brainer. It was a little bit of a step up. And then I was there for about 18 months. And I decided that I want to fly for Frontier because they were Denver's most loved airline based in Denver. Now we have a lot of bases, but at the time, Denver was the primary base for Frontier. And so now here I am. And they found out that I was in women aviation. I'm passionate about that. I started getting involved in the hiring because I also like making a difference in people's lives who've worked really hard in their careers. And I love helping to have them have an opportunity with Frontier Airlines because it's a life-changing career move. And I still volunteer with Women in Aviation where able on behalf of Frontier. And I still volunteer with Mile High Flight program now that I have an opportunity to do so, because that 10 years that I just got done describing, they call it the lost decade, because I was so busy living in Denver and commuting to my domicile, which was usually Chicago O'Hare, was Charlotte, North Carolina for a little bit. And you just simply don't have time. When I was in that career time building phase, I was gone a lot. I probably had 8 days off a month. I'm catching a flight out. I'm catching a flight home. When I was home, it was basically laundry, sleep, eat, and hop back out and go fly again. And so, birthdays suffer, social gatherings suffer, all kind of hobbies, everything. But I was at a time where I got hired just at the tail end of this hiring curve, and we just kind of rode it for a long time. It was real flat. Now it's a lot different landscape. But boy, there was a time, and a lot of people were there, where you just had to write it out, and that's what you did. So I did that, and now as a result, I'm real particular about how I spend my free time because I used to have so little of it. And
Sure.
Now I really enjoy getting into more of my hobbies and giving back to my community and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of come full circle, and that's it in a nutshell, a little bit.
I love it, though. That's awesome. No, I mean,
a nutshell, but yes.
A large nutshell, coconut. What's a big nut? I don't know. Anyway, have fun with that in the comments. Yeah. So
yeah. Opened that one right up, didn't I?
Yeah. Well, that was me actually. I'm the one who teed that up. So, of course, a lot of people reacting in the chat about like $45 wet. That's insane. Although you can still get that, folks, if you get into a flying club today. My flying club is $65 an hour wet. So it's still possible. It's still possible to do.
Now, that wasn't G1000. That was old school 6-pack. You know what I mean? It's like now it's a whole nother thing. When I was doing my flight training, G1000 was just kind of coming out and being the thing. So they had a 172, I think it was an RG, that had G1000 in it. And that was, however much extra or whatever. I think it was like $85 an hour or something. But, it was a lot cheaper than it is now. I mean, boy, I can't believe how much it is now to flight train. I mean, how do people, get to where they need to go?
Yeah, I don't know. We've got a lot of friends who are pursuing career, and actually a mutual friend of ours, Connie, Constance McCorkle, is like, she's on that looking to become an airline pilot, and I watch her. And Connie, I hope it's okay to say this, like, she's just busting her butt, right, to like make it. Like, she's like laser focused, and it is like a lot, right? Like, it's a lot. I'm watching her work so hard to get that flight time, to get the ratings she needs so that she can follow that dream. I don't know. Yeah, Waukesha pilots, like, get that stimmy money. But dude, that stimmy money, the stimulus money is only going to cover like 2 hours.
I was just going to say that won't go very far. But and you know what? That's exactly what it takes. Is honestly, I feel like people who are really dedicated, which is why I love pilots so much, honestly, because everyone's pretty well like-minded. I mean, they're dedicated folks. They're hard workers. They set their mind to something, they accomplish it. I respect that a lot, and it's not easy to get here. I mean, it's beg, borrow, steal sometimes, and it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, you really a career, even if it's a hiring boom and it's all this stuff, it's still a lot. It really is, and that's part of the reason, like I said, I wanted to help where I could, because I just kind of had to pick my way through everything and figure it out. And now Women in Aviation is getting so big that there's relative programs, there's grants, scholarships. That's something. There's grants and scholarships through various means, but nonetheless, it's still expensive, and it takes a lot of dedication and a lot of hard work and a lot of fortitude, because a lot of times, this career at times will push you to the brink of absolutely questioning your motive as to why you started on this journey. Should you continue? And it builds a lot of character in some regards like that, because it makes you dig deep and remember your why. And and it seems like I have a philosophy in life: when things are really, really, really hard, if you can push through that and get to the other side, that's like the beginning of the new thing. If you quit, then that's the end of it. But it's like, if you can just push a little bit further, that's it.
It feels like on the outside, right? So, I mean, again, I'm only a private pilot. I mean, fraction of the hours, I'm sure.
You're still a pilot.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm not discounting that, but like, I just look at the watching folks go through that career path as I've made friends, and it, like, like the fact that you're on the show again and we're getting to talk about this, right? Like, I watched that career trajectory, and I wonder a lot about how, if I had made the decision to pursue that instead of my career in TV commercials and stuff, like, what would you talked about, like, that 10 years of that, what did you call it, the disappearing 10 years or something,
the missing decade, the lost decade,
I think about decade. My lost decade was still pretty fun. I was pulling all-nighters all the time and working super hard and whatever, but I think what was different is, like, the proximity, right? Like, I still eventually, like, rolled up at home at the end of every night or whatever. Like, there's a different, like, the difference of that low seniority, making your name for yourself, picking up all this different time on these different airframes, right? Like, that, it almost feels similar to my sister-in-law is a dentist, right? And, like, she has a lost decade. There's a whole decade of, like, pop culture that is just does not even exist in her head. Sorry, Jen. But like that, like we'll be like, oh, you remember that, like, Saturday Night Live skit from, like, 10 years ago? And she's like, I don't know. Like, she's just she was laser totally focused. So anyway.
Well, and sometimes, and sometimes in the job itself, when you're training, I can't speak for dentist stuff, but I feel like that's pretty challenging. And, pilot stuff, I mean, there's some stories I could tell you about regional flying days, and it was a little bit rough. I mean, you're flying all kinds of hours, and you're sleeping in a crew room lounger, and you just get done flying your sixth leg for the day, and I flew into Chicago, and we land at, like, we rush all day long. We land early, and then we have to sit in the penalty box because our gate is occupied, and the very last United flight for the day is leaving out of the C gates, and I'm in the F gates, which is a 20-minute hike if you're really hauling it, and you show up sweaty or whatever. Well, you sit there in the penalty box, which is looking at Charlie 20 or whatever it is, and they just got cleared to push, and that was the last flight to Denver for the day. So you're like, well, I guess I'm staying in the crew room on the lounger again tonight to catch the 5:20 tomorrow morning back to Denver for my one day off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, I think any good career path just for the, like, I know we have a number of young viewers that tune in every week, and I, like, the like old guy advice, right, is like any path, any career that's worth it in the end is gonna have that chunk of time.
Yes.
And if you are in it, right, and I think you said something similar when you were kind of giving the nutshell, like the if you're in it, right, the thing, I think I've said this to Patreon supporters in like the after show that we do once. I was saying something about, even at its worst, right? If you love what you do, not every day is gonna be amazing. It's just like a marriage, right? Like not every day is
Yes.
unicorns and rainbows. Like a good marriage is work. A good career is obviously work, but like at its worst, it's still going to be better because you had agency to get yourself to that position, right? Like you still made the decision to be an airline pilot, and even on its worst, I just want to like explain this to folks like who might be like, "Oh, that sounds really hard. I don't know." It's like, no, like even on its hardest day, the hardest day, I think I did the worst day of my film career in terms of hours was 20 hours straight work, and it was brutal.
Oof.
But it was
Yeah.
also like the cool, like it was one of the coolest shoots I ever did, and also I made a lot of overtime. But like the
Bonus.
the whole, I guess, sorry, I'm like getting a little preachy, but like I think just to back up what you're saying, like I think separately though, like that lost decade, like at least for me, was like super worth it. And I didn't have a truly lost decade the way I think you probably did, but like, or my sister-in-law did, right? But like I think that's worth it in the end because we are pursuing something we're passionate about. So don't let that put you off as we talk about like
Oh,
this difficulty stuff. Like that's like you're still gonna love it more than if you're not the kind of person who wants to sit in a cube all day, right? Some people really love that.
yeah.
I'm not that person. If you're not the person who wants to sit in a cube all day, you're still gonna love the crappiest day of your dream job.
That's exactly right. And it sounds challenging. And so when I emphasized the lost decade, it was, scraping by financially. But that was when, I mean, I $19 an hour on a Beech 1900. I mean, that's like $19,000 a year. The only way I made it was because I had severance from Jeppesen, and because I'd worked there for quite a long time. And I supplemented the lack of income, and then I transitioned to the jet and made a little bit more money then. But the pay has come up significantly since then. So that was challenging because the last decade involved not being able to do anything other than just kind of tread water financially because I was pursuing this dream. And you're right, there was a lot of give and take, and so that was a give, but a take was I flew with some of the coolest, funnest people that you've ever want to meet, and I just got done flying to Charleston and Albany, New York in the fall, and I'm on short final into Albany, and we pop out of the clouds, and it just looks like a postcard because it's exploding red and orange and yellow, and this little white steeple of this church just off to the side. I mean, I feel like I wish I could have taken a picture because it looked like a postcard right in front of us, and just really fun times, and barbecue in North Carolina and barbecue in Memphis and then barbecue in Austin, Texas. And I did this thing where I would like buy different seasonings and spices that you can only get in the South or in Texas or something to bring it home to season my own meats. And so it wasn't all like super challenging. It was just, I was like you were just talking about, I was making a choice because it was really fun. And yes, I wasn't able to go to birthdays sometimes or whatever, but I do my best to stay in touch on the phone. And everybody just kind of knew I was busy and working on my career and stuff like that. And I was, but I still did my best to be around. I mean, I was still able to go to my sister's put on a baby shower and do that. It was challenging, and I had to really have good time management skills to do all that. But on the other hand, I went to work. It didn't feel like I was going to work. It felt like I was going on mini vacays because we had these great overnights, sometimes like 20 some hours in Charleston. So back then we didn't have Ubers, it was taxi. We'd go downtown Charleston with a really fun crew and just have a ball. Or Memphis, go down and do some barbecue stuff. And we found this place that was like an Elvis tribute. And I mean, really neat stuff. Austin, like 6th Street. I mean, this job, and that's why I'm so glad I stuck with it, because that lost decade was not lost like life. It was lost in like retirement savings and, moving on in life of like other places to live or whatever, new cars, whatever, who cares? I mean, I was so young. I was living my life in such a robust way. I was really gaining a lot of life experience and seeing a lot of cool stuff and gaining flight time and meeting a lot of awesome people. I mean, I don't regret it at all. Now, at the end, I was ready to move on to the next thing. And, the hiring was a little bit tough at that time. So that's when I had to kind of dig deep. And there was other things that I had met that I had to, dig in as to what my why was. But that's maybe 5%, and the other was like 95%. Like, even, yes, sleeping in a crew room couch is not the funnest, but that was only every once in a while. And that was because I chose to live in Denver and fly out of Chicago. Had I lived in base, it would have been a different situation. So, there's other choices to be made for, everybody, however they want to do it. But the experience that I got and the life coolness, it was just awesome. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. And now I'm really glad that I had that experience because of the experience and the people that I met. And now my life is not like that at all. I mean, I make a lot more money than I used to, thankfully, because, you don't make a lot of money at first when you're doing this. And then you get the payoff, and I'm able to catch up on my retirement now. So that's great because I needed to. And I'm still going to cool places. I'm still flying with cool people. I still love my job, even with all of the challenges that we all face in our day-to-day jobs, because that's life. I still love it. I really do. And I'm like you said, I used to work in a cubicle and I thought that was awesome. And I was going to stay at Jeppesen forever, but life presented itself in other directions and I seized the day, so to speak. And, if you have the courage to go where life takes you, it can be pretty awesome. And you just have to navigate those bumps and challenges as best you can. And that's just life.
I mean, technically, you just work in like a really giant cubicle that like goes Mach point whatever.
8.1 if we're pushing it.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So we've got some questions coming in the chat. I mean, so you fly, just to catch everyone up, you fly an Airbus, correct? Is that the current airframe?
Yep.
And we had Joe Costanza on a couple weeks ago. He's an Airbus pilot as well, and he mostly I was like, oh, what's the coolest thing with Airbus? And he said the tray table that comes out in front of you, so he can read magazines. But like,
that's such an Airbus pilot thing to say. That's so funny.
But I'm curious for you. I mean, you've flown a lot of different aircraft over the course of your career, some that I will have to Google later, even, like, which is awesome. Like, if you had to talk about what your I mean, obviously the airline pilot career, right, the day-to-day of that is maybe a little more, people see it in pop culture and stuff, but if you had to talk about like the flying you're doing right now and maybe what you like about the flying you do right now, or what's unique about the flying you're doing right now, I think that would be interesting, because we have a lot of GA pilots on this show. We don't have a ton of people with your experience, so I'd just be curious what that part of it's like for you.
I think, gosh, it's hard to describe. Well, what I love about the Airbus is the fact that in the cockpit I can fully stand up. I'm 5'7", and I can stretch. And, when I flew the 1900, there was no standing up at all, unless you went out into where the passengers were. And in the CRJ, that's a fairly small cockpit as well, so there wasn't a lot of room to get up and do that. And it just, for me, it's awesome. I love the tray table. That is excellent. The joystick with the side stick was a little bit not tough. It was just different to get used to, because I was used to flying a yoke. But standing up in the cockpit is pretty awesome, I gotta say. The fact that we have 2 jump seats, at least right now we do until further configuration changes are made, but we've got 2 jump seats typically. So if people are getting to work, we can take 2 pilots in the flight deck with us, so we don't leave as many people behind if we're a full flight. I like that. What I like, I guess, is the Airbus. Sometimes I don't feel like there's a real formula to get a great landing every time. So I feel like every time's the first time almost. that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but the joke is the new Airbus pilot says, "What's it doing now?" And the old Airbus pilot says, "Oh, it's doing it again." The answer is who knows, because the Airbus is a unique bird. It's an awesome airplane, but it's got a lot of computers on board, and it's got a lot of logics in place, for safety measures and that kind of stuff. And you really have to know what that logic is, so that sometimes you can work with it or mitigate whatever it's doing if it's not doing what you want it to do. But I like flying fewer legs. I go longer legs now. Like today I flew to Fresno, which was only about 2.5 hours. But when I flew for the regionals, sometimes it would be Chicago to Milwaukee, and that's like a 12-minute flight, and then Milwaukee back to Chicago, and then we'd fly somewhere else. And the legs were shorter and more frequent. So I flew probably on the 1900, I flew 8 to 10 legs a day. That's absolutely exhausting. On the CRJ, I flew around 4, 6. It just depended. And now I typically fly. We do have 4-leg days at Frontier, but I typically like to fly the longer legs. Like I do Charlotte or from Denver, or I'll do Atlanta from Denver, or something where it's about 3.5 hours out. You turn the aircraft on the ground for about an hour, and then you fly right back. So I kind of like that flying. And there's times for challenging, like we do something called a Cat 3 Autoland. And if I'm speaking too basic, I'm sorry. I don't know who knows about Cat 3 Autolands or what. So, but that's a pretty cool deal where the airplane will land itself essentially, and we're monitoring and we're on a checklist and we're right there, but the autopilot does everything, and we kick off the autopilot and taxi it off the runway. That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. My plane cannot do that. My plane also has a lot less thrust. Okay, I'm gonna get to my wife's questions, because these were she was super pumped to ask these. Separately, I will also tell you. So my daughter, I've got a 5-year-old, and she always asks me about who's going to be on the show, and I showed the thumbnail to her. I was like, "Oh, this is Carolyn. This is going to be on the show tonight." And she said she's never said this about anyone else before. She said, "Tell her that even though I don't know her, I've never seen her fly, she's the best pilot in the world." So Elaine says you're the best pilot in the world. So. So that's really cool. But so my wife wanted me to ask kind of two questions, and I think these will be really interesting to get your perspective on. She said, one, what is an unknown or unexpected perk of your job?
Okay, I think an unexpected perk, gosh. I feel like I kind of knew what the perks were. I guess an unexpected perk for me was the lifelong friendships I would form. You know how it goes in flight training. Everybody gets together and you're studying. I mean, it's a thing. And so I think when I did flight school for the Beech 1900, we had this group of people that today we're still tight. And that was in 2006. We're still tight. Like, we still keep in touch on Facebook. We still send each other text messages. I mean, we're like brothers and sisters. That's probably an unexpected perk, because I never would have thought that by driving to Wichita, Kansas, and being there for 3 months doing this intensive, crazy, am I going to make it training in my mind, would I form lifelong, deep and meaningful, wonderful relationships with people.
That's one that I've people ask. EAA interviewed me once, and they were like, "Oh, what's your favorite part of aviation?" And I was like, "I don't want to be like cliche, but the people. I never thought that people, all my best friends are pilot. It's we all met through this shared love, and I never thought. I mean, I remember walking through AirVenture the first time and just feeling so alone. And then a year later, it's I'm invited to every, you know what I mean? There's a place for you.
I know. Women in aviation, you know what? That is absolutely 100% true. And women in aviation, my first experience with women in aviation, one of my dear, dear friends, I'd never met her before. I went with one of my college professors who was one of my mentors. Colonel Bob Mock, God rest his soul. He was an amazing, amazing man. And he really made a large impact on my life. And part of what I do and how I feel is because to honor him and carry on his legacy, because he was a phenomenal man. And he introduced me to Women in Aviation, the conference. So he ushered me in with he and his wife, Gail. And I was like, a deer in the headlights. I had no idea my first year and this and that. And my girlfriend, Shelly, came up to me, and this is just one example of many. She just decided she was going to love me and, be my friend, and showed me all around and introduced me to people. And then every year I'd go back, and every year you see the same people over and over again. And here 13, 14 years later, you look forward to the conference, not only for the motivation, but the camaraderie, because this may be the only time that you get to see these people. And it is amazing to walk down the hallway of a conference hall in Orlando, Florida or whatever, with 5,000 people. And you can't walk 3 steps without running into somebody that who truly cares about you, who you catch up. I mean, it's an amazing, and that's, I guess, another thing. It's an amazing lifestyle. I never thought that being a pilot would be a lifestyle. And it kind of is, because I'd say 98% of my friends are pilots or flight attendants or flight crew of some sort. And it's really cool because, like you said, it's just this thing, and it's just such a unique and awesome group of people. I love it.
It's rare. Like, I think it's a rare. I don't know if it's that rare. I feel like it's probably true of any path, but I feel like something about being airborne, there's like that. I talk a lot about the show about being like superhuman, right? Like this superhuman thing that we're all doing together, and then that it almost feels like you go to a wedding. Like, it's interesting. Like, if you think about it, I feel like I can remember every wedding I've ever been at and all the people that were at that wedding, and I feel like every flight I've taken with anybody, I can. I mean, maybe not for you because you fly like a lot, but I feel like I can remember every flight right now. Like, if someone's like, remember that flight we were on? I'd be like, boom, it's like in there. I think something about it like crystallizes it for us, and that makes the friendship stronger, maybe? I don't know. Maybe I'm just making that up.
Yeah. No, I think there's something to it.
Because I want to earn more brownie points with my wife, I'm going to ask you this other question. She said, if you couldn't be a pilot anymore, if your career no longer existed, what else would you be doing?
Gosh, I feel like I never even think about that.
That's a good answer too, though.
I don't know that I really don't want to do anything else. I mean, I suppose if I had to, I would come up with something. I could be human factors. I could be a project manager. I don't really want to do either of those things. I could go back to doing hair. I might own my own business. I would probably get my, I don't know, maybe real estate, ? I'm not sure. But, and still volunteer. I'd be like, well, even if I can't fly, I'm going to help others to learn from whatever I've got to say and whatever my experience is to help them along their journey. Probably more of that, but God, to be honest with you, I can't even really even picture myself doing anything else.
I think the answer is not that you need me to tell you, but what you keep talking about is this passion for mentorship. So I think that last one, if I had to put money on it after talking to you twice, that's what I would put money on. I don't know. All right, let's get to the chat.
Yeah, you're right.
There's a you don't have to answer this question, but I think everyone's kind of wondering it because everyone always wants to hear from professional pilots this question. Nathan Ballard is asking, can you ask Carolyn what her craziest / sketchiest flight was? So I'm going to ask, but you don't have to answer if that's not cool to ask.
No, that's fine. God, I'm thinking sketchiest flight. Well, okay. So
there I was.
There I was. I was based in Las Vegas on the Beech 1900, that turboprop I was telling you about. And we had a small group of people, and we all flew with each other over and over again. It was a really tight-knit group amongst the other. And I was flying with one of our captains that came in from another base. And I think he was only there for like a week, TDY or something like that. And that was paper chart days. We didn't have an EFB or any of that stuff. So we'd have our charts out. I would highlight all of my VORs, my radials, my frequencies, everything. And after a while, I just had everything memorized because we did the same routes. Well, this new guy showed up, and it was probably 2 times with him, but I'll just make it into one story. And this new guy showed up, and he was waiting for his slot on the CRJ. So he was still flying the Beech 1900, and he was a real nice guy. But I made the mistake of, and this is a learning thing for me, I made the mistake of thinking that everybody just knows what they're doing all the time. And most people do. And he did also, but there was a communication breakdown because we didn't talk about the weather in Las Vegas. We were taking off from like California somewhere. And there was an active MOA that we all just knew existed, and we knew the radials, and we knew the heading off of the VOR to stay away from it, yada yada. And that's something we knew. Well, he didn't. I think I briefed him on that, but he was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. Sometimes you fly with people that forget that we're always learning, and they have an opportunity to learn soon thereafter. So he got within about a mile of the MOA because I was on another frequency talking to somebody doing something, and ATC kept calling and saying, where are you going? And I finally caught on to it. He wasn't responding. I don't know what he was doing. Well, we got within a mile of this MOA, and they were barking at us pretty well. And I said to him, what are you doing? I reached up and I turned his heading knob because he was just kind of, I don't know, maybe he was thinking about Christmas. I'm not really sure. But that was a little bit sketch. And then we get into Vegas on another time, and we hadn't discussed the weather. And I was a new pilot, and you're constantly overwhelmed when you're trying to, get up to speed with all sorts of things, 121, everything. So we hadn't discussed the weather, and we come in, and I don't know why, but I missed it. And we get into this layer in Vegas, and it was a CRM breakdown, honestly. And so I'm sitting here going, holy cow, I'm tracking the ILS in, and I'm thinking, what's happening? Whatever, the winds were kind of doing this, that, the other thing. And I'm thinking to myself, did we discuss minimums? I mean, I'm pretty sure we did, but I don't recall what they were. He's not making any call outs. So it was kind of like he's just sitting over there, and it's party of one over here, flying this ILS by myself without any CRM and stuff. So it worked out fine. I popped out right at minimums, but that was crazy. You know what I mean? Vegas rarely flies approaches down to minimums and stuff. And we had some words, and I was like, I feel like as the captain of the ship, you set the tone for the flight, for the crew, for everything. And I was like, I was a little bit disappointed in, how you did not handle that. And, I was obviously, I presumed some things, and I didn't do as good of a job communicating as I could have either. But I was like, the onus typically falls on the captain for things like that, because that's just the way it is. And we had some words about it, but it worked out, but it was pretty stressful.
Sorry, I had myself muted because I didn't want to breathe wrong. I think it's interesting because I think a lot of the like that CRM thing feels like it extends through the whole gamut of aviation. Like I would say my Cessna 172 sketchiest moments are breakdowns in CRM where like positive flight control change, like on the more basic level of what we're doing, right? Like just those things, like it's like, oh, like, yeah, we both thought the other person was flying the plane, right? Like that's, so it's interesting that can extend all the way up.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's, and like I said, I mean, nobody is completely at fault and nobody's without fault, but I took it as I really thought about it a lot afterwards. And to this day, I mean, I feel like that was a pivotal moment for me in my career where I feel like I graduated to the next level of being a professional aviator, because I thought, that's an opportunity for me to come up higher and me to be better rather than to expect the other person to do that. I thought, I'm going to take this as a learning lesson. And I did. And it really was a great learning lesson. And like I said, it really helped me to turn that corner and graduate to another level as an aviator.
I think those are also the moments in careers where you you what book did I just we just read a book to read a book to my daughters this last night. It's like, I think it's called What Do You Do with a Problem? And the moral of the story is like every problem is an opportunity, right? And I think in our careers, in my experience, and it sounds like that separately is those problems become like career opportunities, right? Because then you identified in yourself like something about your drive. Maybe, I don't know. Am I inferring too much? I don't. I feel like I'm inadvertently becoming like a therapist tonight. Like I'm like, oh, tell me more about yourself. Like that's not what I'm trying to do. But I don't know. I'm getting inspired over here a little bit, right? Like you're validating a lot of like, like the way you're speaking about this is validating a lot about how this is all supposed to, like, this crazy thing called life is supposed to work. I don't know. SuperAero,
Yeah, no, I really
deep
think that.
sessions.
Yeah, right. I know. Well, hey, if you want philosophical, come to me. I'm all about it. But honestly, you know, I feel like we all have those times, and that's really how we grow. Is we either look at it and feel like, oh, you beat yourself up, or you become a victim, or you grow and you get better. So I choose grow and get better.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree. So let's talk about growing and getting better. So if you had advice, and I think I asked you this a couple months ago when you were on the show, but if you had advice for people watching right now who want to, I mean, honestly, like, Connie's like kind of like the perfect person, right? Like, if you had advice for Connie, she's off like in the trenches, so to speak, right now, like, trying to bang out those hours, trying to get things done. If you had advice for my daughters or anyone who's like getting ready to try to pursue a career in aviation. I mean, obviously your route was kind of unique and exciting, right? In terms of like the way that you found it, and you were doing aviation adjacent things, which I think is really cool. Like, this is a very long way to ask the question. Like, what advice would you have for the Connies out there who are already in it, or the people who are considering it? Like, what's the wisdom that you can infer?
I think to surround yourself with people who are where you want to be, because they can help you come up, and it's like you become part of this thing before you're part of the thing, if that makes sense. The other thing is to keep your eye on the prize, and have whatever that is. If it's something written on your mirror, or something put in your wallet, or something to remember your why as to what you're doing, why you're doing it, and to remember what you're working towards. Because if you keep your eye on that, it's just like, hitting a baseball or driving a motorcycle, you're going to go where you look. So keep your eye on that. I also think to take it a step at a time. And I remember I'd get real overwhelmed if I thought, how am I ever going to get to Frontier Airlines when I'm flying a Beech 1900 out of Vegas, 6 legs a day or whatever, and I've got 1,500 hours or something like that. And yet here I am. So I think it's important to create milestones for yourself. I get my private pilot's license, and I'm going to get my instrument, and just focus on that. And it can even be sub milestones to that. Like, I'm going to study 3 hours a day for a week, and that's my goal now, or whatever it might be, to break the bigger picture down into smaller portions and focus on that and doing that well, because I feel like that momentum builds upon itself. Otherwise, it can get very overwhelming and feel daunting, and it can be self-defeating. So I say, bring it down, stay focused on smaller goals along the way while keeping your big goal in mind. Like what I did for one of my motivation things when times were hard is I had a picture of a CRJ when I was working at Jeppesen, and I wasn't even a Beech 1900 pilot yet. And I printed a picture of a CRJ with these clouds. I still have it. And I put that sucker on the door to my garage. So every time I'd go out to my car, I would see this picture of that CRJ. And that's like a subconscious thing as well, because that's a powerful deal. And then, the Beech 1900 came up and this and that. And one day I realized, because I had moved, holy cow, I am flying the airplane that was on the back of my garage for 5 years. So keep things in where you're looking that motivate you, that keep you going. Like, that's what I'm working towards. But in the meantime, I'm going to focus on these digestible, smaller goals that are attainable so I don't overwhelm myself. And I'm going to immerse myself in a group of people who are like-minded and doing the same thing, and try to enjoy the process instead of just focusing laser-like on the goal. And enjoy the process. Look around, take a breath, and look at outside. Like you're following a railroad track to somewhere, to this town, and verifying it on your chart and stuff. That's cool stuff. Or look at the clouds, or feel the wind in your face from the vents, or feel the rumbling of the engine as you're flying around. Those are really immerse yourself in the presence of now, because before you know it, that will be over and you'll be on to the next thing. And that's all great. But sometimes I think we're so busy trying to get somewhere that we don't really be in the now. And that's how life is built and memories are built, is being in the now. And you'll find that you'll have all these memories, like, wow, and you can look back and say, that's where I was, and now that's where I am, and it's all good stuff. So I hope that answers the question, and I'm sure that was a little bit philosophical, but that's how I did it.
That's what we're here for tonight. No, you're totally resonating with everybody. I mean, yeah, like Sarah here is saying, great advice and words of wisdom. So totally resonating with her. A little bit further back in our conversation, but I thought this was really interesting. Clayton said, fail is actually your first attempt in learning, in reference to the previous conversation. I thought that was a good way to think about that. And then 72 Papa says you're on his wavelength. One thing that occurred to me was, it's kind of like that thing of like, how do you eat an elephant? It's like one bite at a time or whatever, that dad joke. But like, and the other thing that resonated with me that you just said was this idea of like, for you it was the picture on the door, right? This idea of like, we're gonna go super philosophical for a second. This idea of like manifesting, right? Like I heard there was a singer who was like rapping a song. He's like, wake up and manifest, like every day, like wake up and manifest what you want. And people talk about that a little bit in like, like hippie culture or whatever. Like I had a friend who was like, oh yeah, one time we were out in the woods with this hippie group of people, and they were like, oh, we're going to go manifest a van and then drive it to Hawaii, which is not possible. But then, like, they got a van, which I think means they stole it, but whatever, like, follow your dreams. So I don't know. Like, it occurred to me that a lot of what the challenges I've had in my life are where I self-censor away from that. Right? Like when I'm like, oh, I can't do it, or that would be dumb, or with art, like with YouTube videos even, right? It's like, it's a dumb idea, instead of just like doing it, right? And so I think what you're talking about here is like, take the bite-sized chunk, tackle it, boom, done, on to the next. And then the other thing that I just want to call out that really hit a chord with me was the like stop and smell the roses idea, because like I'm almost middle-aged, and like I'm like, oh my god, it's over, right? Like, oh, I blinked, I didn't like pay attention to this, and now it's over. So I don't know, just for the I know we have some younger folks watching, like, Carolyn's right, like, pay attention, because then you'll be dead.
Honestly, that's right. I mean, I seriously, I feel like there are sometimes I reflect on where I've been, and that's another important thing, is to stop and look back to see how far you've come. I know it sounds cliche, but celebrate your accomplishments. And it's true, because if you don't, you'll wake up and you're like, gosh, I have all these type ratings and all this flight time, and I never really stopped and paid attention to any of it. Like, celebrate the milestones, the accomplishments, and look back to see how far you've come. That is so important, because if we don't, we just keep on trucking along, and we never really feel like we've done anything, and we've done a lot. So that's another thing that's one of my regrets, is not being more present sometimes. But in my defense, sometimes I felt it wasn't possible. It was just craziness, and it was busy, and it's really sometimes challenging to be present when you've got 15 balls in the air and you're in this, but you're already thinking on to the next thing and the next thing after that, because that's a pilot brain as well. We train ourselves to think multidimensionally, multi-directionally, and about 4 steps ahead of where we are right now. That's just a pilot brain. So I think if we can catch ourselves and realize that, and even if it's a moment, I read this book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And, I don't think I finished it, but I remember some of the stuff in there, and it was talking exactly about that. And it really resonated with me, because I'm like, wow, if you look back on your life, I bet you we can all have times like this where I feel like there's a year that I don't even remember, because I was so busy doing that brain that I was just telling you, the pilot brain and the busy brain that I was telling you about, that I go, geez, I don't remember a whole lot of that. So that really hit me in that book. And he's like, stop. And what does the wind feel like in your face? What can you smell? What are you feeling? Feel your body, like whatever it is, to get yourself in the now moment. And ever since I started doing that, I feel like I can recall a whole lot more about what's gone on in my life or whatever. And I'm grateful for that, because there's a lot of cool stuff, especially when it's super cool. You're like, I want to be in this moment right now. Take your picture, post it on Instagram or Facebook, whatever you're doing, and then take a minute and just be there and go, whoa, and just like ingrain it in your brain so you can really appreciate that moment and it sticks with you, And that's what I regret not doing more of, but I did it enough that I feel good about it. But now going forward, I make sure that I really live by that principle, because it's that before you know it, gigs up and I want to remember stuff.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
That's
honestly,
funny.
When we were
go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I received some advice from a film director friend of mine that was exactly the same thing you just said, and it's the best functional advice I've ever gotten in my life. It was about a specific situation, but it was basically the same thing. He was like, hey, like, never mind this thing, like take a mental picture and like concentrate on the moment, think about it, because you will forget everything else eventually. It's all going to go away. But if you do this like mental exercise of what you're talking about, like really notice things, really try to inscribe it in, it will actually stay. And then you have it, like, for instance, like, it doesn't have to be a sketchy flight, or it doesn't have to be something that like your body kind of like commits to memory because it's a learning experience. It can just be like, whoa, I never want to forget the way the clouds look up here right now. I'm going to just put that in there. Sorry, am I being too theater kid right now? But like, that's a real thing. Like, it's a real
No.
thing. It's the best advice I ever got, and you just gave it to me again, second time. So it must be right.
Yeah. I feel like from living that principle, it's really changed my life in being able to really just feel like I'm living my life more fully, because I'm still living my life fully, but I guess we get so busy we don't pay attention to how fully we're living our lives. So it's awesome to stop and pay attention to that. And in that same vein, to circle back to the other point of immersing yourself in everything and keeping your why in front of you and your goal, and focusing on the smaller accomplishments and tasks so that you can feel successful, because success breeds success. Another thing is, one of the mantras I live by in life is where attention goes, energy flows. So if you give attention to the negativity or the despair or the doubt or the fear, that's where energy flows. Or if you say, you know what, I don't have the answers right now, I don't have to have the answers, I'm setting my intention, this is where I'm going, I'm doing my work to get there, and that's it. I'm going to enjoy the experience along the way, celebrate my accomplishments, and take it a step at a time. And that's ultimately how anybody reaches their goals.
I love it. I absolutely love it. We are a little over time, but do I have time to play a game with you real quick before we hang up for the night? Are you up for it?
Yeah.
All right. So I think we played this last time you were on the show, but you only got to answer a handful of the questions. This game's called Short Final, where we just ask a bunch of short answer questions in a minute, and we see how many we can get done. You've already won. I remember what I was going to say. Carolyn, when are you writing your book?
It's so funny. I feel like maybe in jest, but a lot of people will say that you should write a book, and I think, no way, I'm not that interesting or whatever. But
I'd buy it. I want all this
so
inspiration all the time. I want this. I want to have it to look at so I can be like, yeah. Because the other thing that's gonna happen is you're gonna have to give me your phone number. I'm gonna have to call you for, hey, I'm having a rough day. I need a little, give me a little pep talk, and you'd be like, go manifest it, Ryan. So a book. You gotta write a book.
Where attention goes, energy flows.
I love it. Let's do it. Okay, let's play a game. All right. So we're gonna forego the dramatic music, but I'm gonna put a timer on the clock. Carolyn Landron, first officer at Frontier. First question is, favorite airport you've ever landed at?
LaGuardia.
Was not expecting that one, but I'll take it. What about track up or north up?
It depends.
Fair. What about the favorite airframe you've ever flown?
Airbus.
Okay. You guys call them airframes because you're like pro pilots, like airframe. Anyway, am I making that up? You just call it aircraft. I don't know. This was sent in by a viewer. They want to know who your favorite flight attendant is.
Oh my goodness, we have too many wonderful flight attendants. I have a handful of favorite flight attendants.
It's supposed to be Connie.
I mean, Connie. But I've never flown with Connie.
What, really? Well, then, that's not fair, Connie. You can't do that. Connie wanted me to ask you that. And then I think we talked about this before, but I have written down, you sort of answered this before, but the best feature of the Airbus for a pilot.
The cockpit.
Sweet. Awesome. Dude, Carolyn, this has been awesome. I'm so inspired. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I think that the things that I've taken over from the 2 times you've been on the show now are just so much passion for it, and inadvertently both times you've ended up mentoring me. It's like you can't help it. You're like, let me get you inspired.
I'm passionate.
I love it. By the way, you talked about flying the Milwaukee-Chicago route. It was something that occurred to me. That's like that's around where I fly, like south of Milwaukee, in between Milwaukee and Chicago at Fairmount. And like you're at like GA altitudes when you were in that part of your career, right? You're just like, oh hey, 172s, like hey, coming through. Excuse us, coming super fast.
Oh yeah. Yep. It's like checklist. That's it. 12 minutes. You're just checklist.
Yeah, that would be exhausting.
Yeah, I didn't care for that reason, because we're like, oh man, Chicago Milwaukee turn, just because it was just so much. So it was a lot of work. But flying low was cool. And, it was also kind of cool once in a while because you're just like, all right, do I still have it? Yep, I'm on it. Like,
yeah,
and,
sure.
we'd have a game like,
challenge.
Yeah, how fast can we get this checklist done? Hey, I got 4 minutes en route to look out the window. Woo!
You're like, oh, look at that. Hey, there's Racine, Wisconsin, home of not really much. Hey, I can say that because I'm
from that whole
there.
area, by the way, in the fall is breathtaking.
We do have
Wisconsin in the fall is breathtaking. Oh man, I loved that in the fall. It was just gorgeous.
Thanks for bailing me out. All right, guys. Carolyn, thank you so much for being on tonight, taking the time. I know you had a busy schedule and you kind of squeezed us in, and I just cannot thank you enough for it. We'll have to have you on again. I don't know, when I need another dose of encouragement, I'll just call you up and you can come on the show and be like, come on, Ryan, follow your dreams.
I'm your person. I'm stoked. I'm in it.
All right. And then separately, let us know when you can come on to promote your new book.
Exactly. Okay. We'll look forward to that. Okay. And you can call me whenever. I'll email you my phone number, and if you need inspiration or whatever, I'm happy to help.
Oh my God. All right. Careful. I'll call you a lot. Like, I need help today. I know you're flying, but I need help right now. Uh, thanks so much, Carolyn. Everybody else, thanks so much for watching this week. What a great show tonight. I saw a couple of things I wanted to point out in the chat. First of all, if you're in Texas, it sounds like there's some severe weather in Texas. Some people had to bounce out because of the severe weather, and so guys, just stay safe. I hope you're all safe.
Yeah.
Separately, I wanted to say to Jonathan and Nick for the super chats during the show. You guys are legends. Thank you for supporting the show that way. And then another thing I saw in the chat was Robert has a solo cross country, his first solo cross country coming up, I think this weekend, he said. So good luck on that, Robert. And I think father-daughter flights has an upcoming solo.
Aww.
So that's going to be amazing. You're never, sorry, I could put Carolyn back on screen. You're never going to forget that father-daughter flights. It's going to be amazing. So good luck on that when that happens. So you guys are pursuing your training and everything. Just keep trucking at it like Carolyn was saying, and it's going to be awesome. So anyway, good luck to you doing those kind of flight milestones. Don't forget to take the picture in your head like we were talking about. I mean, you can't really you'll never forget your first solo. But anyway.
No, it's going to be awesome. Awesome.
So cool. All right, everyone, be safe. Take care. We're going to sign off, but we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks so much.